Hey, what's up, guys? It's Jonathan here. So, have you ever wondered what's the cheapest way to own a phone? Is it better to renew your phone every year or every 2 years, or just to hold it until the phone falls into pieces and then just buy a brand new phone then? And coming up with this comparison can be very difficult given the multiple offers, given the various different factors that could go into it. I spent a good amount of time trying to figure out a general consensus on what's the most cost efficient way to own a phone. And because of my hours of searching on Google didn't come up with anything, I decided to actually make a video that discussed this in further detail. So in this video, we're going to discuss the cost of ownership of an iPhone and compare different hold-in times from one another to see if we can figure out what's the most optimal way to own an iPhone. And also in this video, I plan to give you some other things to consider as well, other than just price when upgrading an iPhone. And this video took a lot of time to plan out, so all I ask for in return is that you just hit the like button for the YouTube algorithm. It greatly helps out the channel and it helps push this video to as many people as possible, so people can know what's the most optimal way to buy an iPhone. So without any further ado, let's just get right into the video. So like I just mentioned, there's multiple factors that go into what's the best way to own an iPhone. So I think it was best for us to start with a couple of assumptions. And these assumptions are that the person who's buying the cell phone does not currently own an iPhone at the moment. Second, we're also going to assume that every new iPhone that this person buys costs $1,000. And I know that this could be very skewed because now there's phones that start as low as $500 and there's some that go all the way up to $1,500. But I just decided to pick a nice round even figure of $1,000 just to make the math simple. And we're also going to assume that this pricing does not include any any deals from any cell phone companies or anything of that nature. This is just strictly the cost of the phone. Another assumption that we're going to make is that the phone is traded in with Apple every single time a trade-in occurs. And I know that this is a very controversial subject because there's other ways that you could trade in an iPhone and get more money, but just to make the math simple, and because Apple already publicly gives out their the highest they'll ever buy a phone off of you for a trade-in, I just decided to stick with those numbers. That also leads me to the next assumption, which is that each time that we trade in a phone, we're going to get maximum value for it. And a good amount of times that is the case, but if you have like a swollen battery, or if your phone is cracked, or if there's any significant issues like that, that could drastically drop the trade-in value of your phone. So let's keep that in mind. For each ownership situation that we reviewed, we compared the cost of ownership over 10 years. And this way, each situation had a fair shot. Moving over to the spreadsheet, we have 4 different scenarios that we test. We tested training your phone every year, training your phone every 2 years, training your phone every 3 years, and then training your phone every 5 years. The first situation that we did was replacing your phone every year. The initial purchase cost of the phone, like we stated, we assumed was $1,000. Then at the end of the first year, we assumed that phone would trade in for about $380. And like I said before, this can be highly disputed because there is other ways you could get more trade-in value from your phone than simply going through Apple. The first year, the cost of ownership was $620 net. And because in this situation, this person would trade in their phone every year, this would be their cost of ownership every year. So if you multiply this number by 10, we got $6,200, which makes sense because you're technically spending $620 net over a span of 10 years. So moving over to the second situation that we had, which was replacing your phone every 2 years. Again, the initial purchase cost was $1,000 to represent the purchase of the first iPhone. But then after 2 years, the trade-in value actually went down a bit, which obviously makes sense, to $220. That means over 2 years, the phone costs about $780. So if we factor this in for 10 years, it costs about $3,900 for the whole 10-year period. So significantly cheaper than the first year. Okay, so the next situation is if you replace your phone every 3 years. So the initial purchase cost of the phone, again, $1,000 like the other 2 examples. But the trade-in value after 3 years is $120. Over the 3 years that you own the phone, the phone costs you about $880. So factoring that out for 10 years, that means that the phone costs you about almost $3,000. So it's cheaper than the last two examples, but it doesn't have as big of a gap between year 2 and 3 as there is between year 1 and 2. But let's just say that you were to hold on to a phone for 5 years, which is usually about the length of time that iPhone usually works. In some cases, it does work longer. It kind of just depends on how well you take care of it and how you use it. If you were to replace your iPhone every 5 years, again, that initial cost of $1,000 would be factored in, but then your trade-in value after 5 years would basically be zero. And this isn't necessarily according to Apple's website on their trade-in values, but just as just my experience, usually when you have a phone for this long, there's just so many issues with it. Usually you have a swollen battery, or you have a crack in your screen, or you have a dent somewhere, and that essentially lowers the value of your phone to trade in to zero. So that means that over the whole 5-year period, it costs you $1,000 to own the phone. And if we just simply multiply it by 2, that'll give us a 10-year cost of about $2,000. So over 10 years, we can see the cost of each situation. If you were to replace your phone every year, it'll cost you $6,200. If you were to replace it every 2 years, it'll cost you $3,900. If you were to replace it every 3 years, it would cost you about $2,900. And if you were to replace it every 5 years, it'll cost you about $2,000. As I initially thought before I did this research, holding the phone for 5 years and then replacing it at that point is the cheapest way mathematically to own an iPhone. And the significant jump between each situation was between replacing the phone every year and replacing the phone every 2 years. A couple of things to consider when you're upgrading your phone is, what's the overall health of the iPhone that you currently have? Okay, does it still hold a charge pretty well? I remember I used to have an iPhone that was like 6 years old, and I have to charge the phone like 5 times a day. And it almost felt like I didn't even have a mobile phone, but I actually had a landline. Just on my commute to and from work, I would have to charge my phone as soon as I got to a charger. And that's a big deal because the whole point of you having a cell phone is for you to be able to use it on the go. And if you constantly have to charge it, it almost defeats the purpose of even having a cell phone. That's a really big thing to consider if you are replacing a cell phone. Another thing to consider too is cracks. On my old iPhone, which I'll actually show you guys right here, there's actually quite a bit of crack in here. And a lot of these little glass shards would get into my fingers, and it was very painful. I know that there's certain people who have phones that are just like completely shattered. So if you have a phone like that that's completely shattered, or your camera is shattered, so you can't really take selfies, then you really should consider replacing your phone, because again, that defeats the whole purpose of you having your phone, and it takes a lot of usability away from it. Another thing to consider too is, do you use your phone for business? And if you do you write it off against your business income? So for me, obviously, I'm using my phone to film YouTube videos, and I technically consider my endeavors as a YouTuber to be a business. So because of that, I actually do deduct the expense of my phone. From what I know, obviously I'm not a CPA, so I would say confirm this with a CPA or a tax professional. But from what I know, you have 2 choices on how you want to write a phone off of your taxes. You can either do it by depreciating it over a span of, I think, like 7 years, or you could just take 100% depreciation up front. If you're a YouTuber and you use the cameras on your phone quite a bit, or let's say you're a real estate agent and you have to FaceTime clients and things like that of that nature, it kind of makes sense for you to upgrade to the newest phone so you can provide the highest quality value to your clients. Another thing to consider too is that this decision isn't fully just financial. The thing is that if you like having the brand new iPhone and you're already inside a good financial position, you have an emergency fund, you're either on track or ahead of saving for retirement, you already bought yourself a home, and you have all your bad debt paid off, then for me personally, I don't really see the reason why you should cheap out on a couple $100 every year just so then you don't have the latest and greatest phone. And if that's what makes you happy, I totally encourage you to go ahead and do that. So essentially, the longer you hold your phone, the cheaper the cost of ownership will be in the long term. And the biggest cost gap comes between years 1 and 2. And honestly, in my opinion, I don't think iPhones really change that much from the iPhone 10 to the iPhone 11. I think the big changes usually come once you start getting 2 or 3 generations away from each other. I think that's really when it makes sense to upgrade your phone. Personally, for me, it kind of is a moral dilemma for me because I personally don't like upgrading phones, mostly because a phone is a depreciating asset. And I know that in life, you do have to buy depreciating assets. Like, for example, food. Like, you have to buy food because you need to eat to stay alive. So, and as soon as the food either goes spoil or you eat it, the food basically loses monetary value. So I do understand that in life sometimes we do have to buy depreciating assets. But personally, I like to avoid spending my money on those as much as possible. And I like to focus my money on buying appreciating assets like Apple stock or real estate or something like that instead of buying the latest and greatest iPhone. So I'd like to thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button for the YouTube algorithm. It greatly helps out the channel and helps push this video out to as many people as possible. Also, if you enjoyed my perspectives and the way I explain things, consider hitting the subscribe button down below and notification bell. That way you can be notified every time I post a new video. If you have any questions or comments of like where I got my numbers from or how I ran my math, I encourage you to leave them in the comment section down below. I try to respond to as many comments as possible. And also follow me on all the social medias. I try to post there every day. And thank you so much for watching and have a great day.